On this episode of Locked On Angels, is it hot outside or is that a Ben Joyce fastball? Good grief, the Angels beat the Royals last night, and Ben Joyce did something no other player has done this season. Hint, it has to do with that fastball. We're going to tell you what he did. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The number one Angels podcast and good for the entire family. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to get back to the Super Halo Bros for all this Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And this episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB. Use our promo code LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100.
Thank you for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
It's our third season here at Locked On Angels, talking Angels baseball every Monday through Friday. You can always count on Mike and I to be there for you every single weekday, Monday through Friday. Did I mention Monday through Friday?
You did.
5 days a week, baby. Let's go. On today's show, we're sharing a new rule proposal that baseball is considering, and it's absolutely ridiculous. I know, Mike, you probably have your opinions. I think it's hilarious. We'll talk about how that might affect the Halos, but first we got to talk about last night's game against the Royals. The Angels won this one 9-5.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, there it is. Every time, baby. Got to do a little Dolly Parton. But listen, this was quite the game because it was back and forth, and it was close, and then it wasn't, and then it was, and then it wasn't, and so it was just what I liked seeing here was just the Angels' ability to stay ahead, stay in the fight, and not give up despite, everyone trying to ruin their chances, sabotage their own team, I should say.
Yeah. Johnny, I want to talk real quick. They scored in the fourth inning. They got on the board first, which is a good indication for the Angels. Remember, we walked through when the Angels beat good teams, they score first. Mm-hmm. They get on the board first. And so they did in this game. It started with a Nolan Shonowell double in the top of the fourth. John, he's hitting over 370 in the third position in the lineup. Here's my question to you. Do you like Ward at the top and Nolan at 3? Because I really like that, John.
I like it, and I will say that I like Nolan at 3 more than I like Ward at the top. But if that's where Ward is going to thrive, which he seems to be doing better, he still had his hiccups here and there, but sure. if he is doing better at the top, look, to me, he can't handle the third spot. And I know that he was there because, he's the veteran bat that you can rely on in this lineup as far as Angel veterans go. But the thing is Nolan is just succeeding there. So I think it needs to stay that way. Plus, Ward has done well to lead off in the past. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Nolan Shonowell to bat third there.
Yeah, so a double for Shonowell. He also had a couple of walks in this game. And then Kevin Pillar follows with a double. Shonowell scores. Pillar moves to third on a pass ball, and then he scores on a Anthony Rendon sacrifice fly. Would have been a home run if it was Angel Stadium, John.
Every time Rendon gets a hold of one and it dies on the warning track, I just imagine this big cloud going, blowing the ball back toward the field. But this time, would have been a home run at Angel Stadium, his first since July 1st of last year, by the way.
Right.
But this put the Angels up too. The Royals got a run back immediately in the bottom of the fourth. Bobby Witt reached second base when he hit a bloop to right field, and it was going to be a tough play for Jo Adell out there. And this time, Jack Lopez, Shonowell, and Adell all collide together. In fact, it was kind of funny because we got on Jo Adell for running into the likes of Mike Trout and Aaron Hicks earlier this season. This time, Jack Lopez runs 800 feet from second base and runs right into Jo Adell and makes him drop the ball. So then Pasquantino doubled and Bobby Witt scored. Hunter Renfroe, the bozo who couldn't hit a lick with runners in scoring position for us last year, is hitting 300 with runners in scoring position for the Royals. He singled and he tied the game. He hit 229 with runners in scoring position last year, Mike, and he had a lot of garbage time runs and RBIs and home runs over his career. But that's the difference between these two teams, to be honest with you, is getting those big hits with runners in scoring position. So this put the game tied after 4. But after all this talk about runners in scoring position, the Angels finally had their chance, right?
Yeah, they went 5 for 16 in this game. John, 5 for 16. I know that that's a pretty good batting average, but they had 16 chances and they got 9 runs in this game. 16 chances to knock in some runners. It started with Zach Neto's 19th home run in the top of the 6th inning. John, most home runs in a single season by a shortstop in franchise history. Jim Fregosi, 22 in 1970. Zach Neto, 19 in 2024. How about that?
You think he'll break that? You think he'll get 23?
I think so. 3 home runs? Yeah. 3 home runs for
4. He's got to get 4
in a month and a half. That's easy. That's so easy. So I could see him doing that. That'd be an easy record for him to at least tie.
And 20 doubles, 20 steals, 19 home runs on the season. How about a 20-20-20 season from Neto? We'll take that in his first full year of playing in the bigs. Obviously, he came up early last year, but he was hurt a lot of the year.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing we wanted to see from this season when it came to the likes of Nolan Schanuel and O'Hoppe and Neto, to see what they can do in a full season. So I think that this is really great news for Zach Neto.
Yeah, 3 home runs to tie, 4 to break the record. I think he's got a good shot to do that. And then after a walk and a hit by pitch, Logan O'Hoppe got an RBI single, followed by an Anthony Rendon RBI single. It made it a 3-run inning for the Halos and gave them a 3-run lead. And then they added more, John, the very next inning after 2 singles, walk to load the bases. Pilar hits a deep sacrifice fly. And then there's that man again, Logan O'Hoppe, followed with an RBI single. Angels led by 5 at this point.
Yeah, the Royals responded with 3 runs of their own in the bottom of the 7th. That was all that Tyler Anderson was able to do. 6 innings pitched, 12 hits, Mike, 5 earned runs, back-to-back starts giving up at least 5 earned runs. He didn't get through that 7th, and I question him coming back out there. Now, the pitch count was in his favor, but you could see, I think he went 1 batter too many, in my opinion. I felt like after the second hitter, I think they had their answer. I think they had the idea that, Tyler Anderson probably needs to go. But then they gave him the 3rd hitter, and I think that's really what did him in there. But Hunter Strickland came in, relief for Anderson. He got the Halos out of the inning. There was a hilarious moment. 9th inning, Rendon walks, Jo Adell doubles. Rendon was sent home, originally called out. He was all over the plate by the time the ball got there. So fortunately, the Angels challenged it. The runner was safe. Rendon had a hit in this game, 2 walks, a sacrifice fly, and 2 runs scored, and the 2 RBIs, of course. And then they finally got their squeeze play, Mike. They finally did it. They've been trying. I was
wondering what your thoughts were.
So hard to get that squeeze play. But look, I thought it was really interesting because the Angels got their 2nd run on that squeeze play. The pitch was in and almost hit him, and he got the bunt down. And
Jack Lopez up at the plate.
Yeah, Jack Lopez was up there and, trying to make up for running into Jo Adell and costing a couple of runs there. But this was Washington's favorite play, of course. And to me, even if he hadn't gotten the bunt, I think that would have been a pass ball. I think that would have been past the catcher. Was it Freddie Fermin this time? Because Salvi was over at first, which, by the way, I thought was hilarious because when their relief pitcher was struggling, it was Salvador Perez who called the meeting at the mound from first base, and he was the one giving guidance to their relief pitcher. I was just like, what a dude. I like that. I know he's an angel killer, but just you can't hate Salvador Perez. He's a good player. Yeah, so I thought that was really funny because he's doing catching duties from first base, which I thought was great. So, the squeeze play did get down. Jo Adell safe, so they added on and were able to lead by 4 at this point.
Yeah, 9th inning, Jack Lopez. There's that man again. He makes an incredible play. So it was a little slow dribbler to second base in between first and second base. He gloves the ball and then flips it, but almost like think think Winter Olympics figure skating. Like that was the move he made. It was kind of like this. He presented himself very well.
It was like slow motion Matrix.
It was beautiful.
Tossing the ball one way while his body's going the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So he throws it to Shawnuel. Obviously, he's out. They called him safe, so the Angels challenged that one, and they won 2 challenges in one game, John.
I know.
This is a miracle. Miracles do happen, friends.
Well, we're talking about the new rule changes that Rob Manfred wants to implement, so he's probably just giving the Angels a gimme because he knows how badly this is going to help affect them later on. But the challenge was won by the Halos. Last at bat, Mike, was Ben Joyce versus Bobby Witt.
That was fun.
And that's a matchup that that you want to see in like a World Series or something like that. Obviously, 2 AL teams, so we'll say playoffs. But what I'm saying here is it's just a matchup of a guy we're really excited about versus Bobby Witt Jr., who is just doing incredible things on the field this season. Joyce threw 3 straight fastballs to Bobby Witt. One was 105, the second one was 105, and the last one was 103 to strike out Witt and end this game. The Angels bullpen didn't allow a base runner at all in this game. So credit to Quijada, Ben Joyce, Hunter Strickland. They came in and did their job. Boy, certainly not the way the bullpen was at the beginning of the season, was it? And so the turnaround there in terms of letting guys like Ben Joyce do their thing, letting Jose Quijada come back from the injured list, jump right back into the bullpen and do his job. Because remember, Ron Washington at one point said, I don't know what Quijada's role is going to be on this team, if he even has one. And I thought, why would you do that to Jose Quijada? Because he's part of this team. He's going to be here next year. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, a huge turnaround for the bullpen. Mike, in terms of development, and we're going to try to identify the development for every game here on out. What did you see from the Halos tonight?
I liked that ninth inning. I liked that inning with Ben Joyce. Ben Joyce did a Shohei Ohtani. I'm just going to throw the hardest pitch, the fastest pitch, my best pitch at you, see what you can do. And he proved that he can amp up and come through in those moments. I loved that, John. I also loved that Shawnuel had a couple of walks. Neto had a couple of hits. Logan O'Hoppe had a few RBIs. That's what's going to be a key to success for this team. Those 3 guys have to be offensively dialed in. One of those 3 guys has to be really offensively dialed in. And I think the other 2 guys, whoever it might be, and I think they're going to be like the 3-headed monster, but one of those guys has got to be dialed in, and the other 2 have to at least be on base or moving runners over. They have to make sure, and that's what this lineup did last night. They have to make sure that they're moving runners over. Lots of sacrifice flies, taking the extra base. That's the type of play that the Angels really need to prioritize. That's when they're successful. And we've seen it in kind of glimpses all the way through this season, right? There are games where we're like, who's this team? Last night was a who's this team, right?
Yeah, 100%. And my thing, Mike, is you credited all the young guys and the vets stayed out of the way, other than Brandon Drury, who struck out 4 times and grounded into a double play. I just, who did he insult on this team to keep running him out there and embarrassing himself night after night? But look, even Kevin Pillar, who, he doesn't get in the way of the young kids, other than maybe playing where Mickey Moniak should play. But Reagan's is a lefty, so that's understandable. 14 pitch at bat and ate up some pitches there and was able to come through. And then even Anthony Rendon coming through with a couple of RBIs and timely walks and timely hits. Somebody made a comment yesterday on our show in the comments and said, I'm afraid to DFA Anthony Rendon because I feel like he would go to another team and crush us, because that's what always happens to the Angels. But I said, you bring up an interesting point. Would he go to another team, or would he just quit baseball and collect his paycheck? Because he can honestly do that at this point. But it was good to see him actually contribute. So I was happy to see the vets stay out of the way in this one.
One real quick thought. I think Moniak, Adell, and Pilar and probably Ward need to rotate into that DH spot and the outfield. Drury needs to be a bench player and only brought in when necessary.
Yeah, there's no reason to have him at DH.
No.
Especially when you got to have him. If he's in this lineup, it's because he's playing a position. So to have him at DH just was mind-boggling to me. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. The Angels are playing the Royals again, 5:10 Pacific time. You can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast on SiriusXM with the SXM app. All you got to do is search Angels. Coming up on Locked On Angels, how would a 6-inning minimum impact baseball, and how would it impact our Halos starting pitching? Whew, that is going to be quite the conversation, and we're going to talk about all of that coming right up.
This episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They have superchargers and roof racks and exhaust kits and LED headlights. It'd be great for my Jeep or my son's Honda, and so much more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts. For whatever car, truck, or SUV you drive, you're going to find exactly what you're looking for at ebaymotors.com. And they have the eBay Guarantee Fit, which is great because they guarantee that your part's going to fit your ride every single time or your money back. They want you burning rubber, not burning cash. And with all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that big W. Keep your car, truck, or SUV alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to U.S. customers.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and everydayers. When you're done here making Locked On Angels your first listen, head on over to Locked On MLB for your second listen with our pal Sully. Going to get you ready for playoffs, the MVP race, all that good stuff. He's got you covered from across all of MLB. So head on over to Locked On MLB. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Speaking of your team, the Angels are back at it tonight, 5:10 Pacific time against the Royals. You can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Angels.
Johnny, there was an ESPN report last week that we've been teasing out, and I want to talk about the report, and then I want to talk about the impact that it might have first on baseball. We'd love to get your thoughts. And then in our last segment, we're going to talk about how it would impact our Halos. So according to the report, baseball is kicking around the idea of requiring starting pitchers to work at least 6 innings. There are some caveats. At first glance, I know this sounds ridiculous, but here's some of the caveats and some of the reasons. First, some of the reasons. They want to place this for baseball because they want to push, obviously, for longer starts, those types of things. A couple of caveats would be that if the pitcher is working really hard in the early innings and he's getting shelled or he's injured, you can take him out. The report also indicates that the exceptions could include throwing 100 pitches, giving up 4 or more earned runs, again, getting injured, which would then require a stint on the IL so that there's no manipulation, right? Now, ESPN, the report on ESPN said that they don't expect this to happen anytime soon, and that baseball isn't a stage where they're ready to test it, and they would test it in the minor leagues or the independent leagues. And the reason why they're not ready to implement this is because teams would need plenty of warning, because they're going to have to stretch out pitchers and they're going to have to reconsider some of the workloads. But the impact, Johnny, is pretty obvious how it would change the game, right?
Yeah. To me, the big question here, Mike, is why? Why do we need this? Why do we need a 6-inning minimum rule? I understand that not everybody is Greg Maddux or Nolan Ryan, and we're trying to get back to that, but the game has changed. And so these guys are throwing really hard. They're throwing tricky stuff. They're throwing nasty stuff, which really puts the torque on the elbow and everything. So this, to me, I know there's caveats for injuries and stuff like that, but I think you're going to run starting pitchers into the ground with this stuff. I think it just doesn't make sense to make this rule. I understand that they're trying to get back to this certain brand of baseball that, you know, is I should say, I guess, what the old heads like, because it doesn't bother me that somebody uses an opener. In fact, I think it's kind of clever. I think it's the kind of thing that, you know, there was the shift and everything, and that was clever when it started. And then they did away with that. And I think baseball, to be honest with you, is better for it. But to remove strategy from a game that, especially in this context, it just doesn't make any sense to me that this is something that they would be considering, especially with the fact that there's already guys who might not go 6 innings and they're still getting hurt anyway. So I just don't understand what this is about.
Well, and so the goal, according to the report, is that the starters will go deeper into games. But here's the issue, John. In 2024, the starters are averaging 5 1/3 innings pitched. There's only been 23 complete games. Only 2 pitchers have multiple complete games. So for reference, let me go back 40 years, 1984, okay? Starting pitchers win a full inning more in 1984, 6 1/3, and 12 pitchers had at least 11 complete games, and the leader of complete games that year was Charlie Huff. It does feel like they're trying to go backwards, right? It does feel like they're trying to bring up the past instead of really evaluating and being strategic for how the game should be played in the present and the future.
The problem is in 1984, fastballs were the speed of today's changeups.
Yeah.
Right. And so guys have learned to throw harder because that's appealing to a team. I mean, we just saw it last night with Ben Joyce. There's a reason why Ben Joyce is a relief pitcher and he's not going to start. And so you get the mileage out of him that you can with the fact that he can throw 103 plus and hit 105 like he did. But the game is entirely different than it was 40 years ago,
right?
When you had these soft tossing fastballs coming in there. And obviously that's going to be easier on your arm. Obviously that's going to provide you some longevity. And obviously you're going to get more length out of your starter. There's a reason why those guys could throw 120, 130, 140 pitches in a game, because the impact of the throw on their arm is not as devastating as it is now.
And I also think it's also the competition, right? When you go back to the early days of baseball, Babe Ruth days, Joe DiMaggio days, those are great players, but they weren't playing great players all of the time, right? There was a whole other league that now they've incorporated into the Hall of Fame that those players weren't able to play. Josh Gibson, one of the greatest players of all time, never was in baseball. And so some of these guys are playing plumbers and they're playing, guys who are working construction and then coming to the game, and that's the thing that this feels like you're not thinking about the competition. You're not thinking about how athletes are building their bodies up. I love these thoughts from Cubs pitching coach. He said, this is how it's going to have to change things. You would have to start to think about your repertoire, that you are going through the lineup 3 times because you're going to the 6th inning. You'd have to think about multiple pitches. So guys like Seth Lugo, who pitched against the Angels in game 1 of this series, the dude's throwing 5 or 6 pitches, right? Yamamoto pitching for the Dodgers, he's got 6 or 7 pitches, right? And so there's a lot of guys that have that, but there's a lot of guys that don't. Diamondbacks GM said you'd have to push command over stuff. You'd have to push pitching to contact, which would be the biggest thing to prepare guys to throw 6 innings on a consistent basis. And then the Cubs general manager said that there would have to be some pullback on velocity. That's what you just said, right? So all of this is tough. According to him, it's tough for us because you're going to pull back on velocity. Last night's 3-out pitching performance, 3 pitches in a row, 100 miles an hour by Ben Joyce, probably doesn't happen if this is implemented in baseball, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is you and I have rattled off about pitch efficiency since the end of last season, because there were some starts from guys like Tyler Anderson. And that's kind of where the conversation came from. And so as we get into the impact on the Halos, I think that pitch efficiency is going to be a big part of that discussion. So we'll talk about how this would impact our Halos in just a minute.
Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike all the other apps, Prize Picks just lets you play against the numbers, not against all of the really good fantasy players. It's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You could turn $100 into $1,000 on Prize Picks. And if you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win. You just receive the $50 bonus because they're glad that you're here. It's guaranteed. And then they have this gimmick, which I love. For football season, 1 Caleb Williams passing yard will get you 1 win on Prize Picks every single week in September. So Caleb Williams played for USC. Now he's playing for the Bears. And they're saying, hey, he's going to get 1 yard. And of course he's going to get 1 yard. So you're going to win. That's 4 weeks of free W's for you. So don't miss that deal on Prize Picks, because when September ends, you're not going to get woken up like Green Day wanted you to get waken up. So
I knew
download Prize Picks. You knew it was coming. Download Prize Picks today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's Locked On MLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, Mike, since Rob Manfred is making up all kinds of new rules and strategies, and even though he's never played an inning of baseball in his life, and this is something that he wants to implement into the game and whatnot, we decided that we wanted to talk about how this would impact the Angels specifically. So not only would it impact the wider world of baseball, but if they were to implement this new rule, what would that look like for the Halos? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so entering last night, the Halos had over 600 innings pitched by their starters this season, 125 starts, again, entering last night. The Halos have averaged around 4 2/3 innings per start, so a Carson Fulmer start.
Yeah,
that's how long they've lasted, right? And that means that they would have to pitch an additional 1 1/3 inning to just reach the minimum. That's not considering how many games they'd have to give up runs. Like we didn't even go back and look at that stuff. How many games happened this year where they gave up more than 4 runs by the 4th inning, right?
Well,
that
look at every
often.
Griffin Canning start.
Right. And so, that would be a problem. We didn't even talk about, we haven't even looked at the numbers of how often they got close to 100 pitches before 6 innings. If this was Tyler Anderson last year, he'd be out in the bottom of the second, right? Like he wouldn't make it. So, John, would this be a huge problem for the Halos?
Oh, huge problem, Mike, for the Halos. You're a huge part of the problem. There's your Seinfeld for the day.
Yep.
But listen, I was bringing this up in the last segment, and it goes back to the end of last year where you and I were talking about the starting pitching, and we got on a conversation about Tyler Anderson and what went wrong for him and what he could do right. And he had a particular start. I want to say it was 8 2/3 innings pitched last year. And so we looked at his worst start and we looked at his best start and we looked at what he did to get through almost 9 innings. And what ended up happening was that turned into a bigger conversation about pitch efficiency and pitching to contact and getting quick outs. And that's something that was brought up by the Cubs GM saying, you got to pull back on velocity. You've got to think about, how to get quick outs and pitch to contact and that sort of thing. And that brings up the pitch efficiency conversation because that is something we've seen recently. We saw it with Griffin Canning 2 starts ago. We saw it with Jack Kohanowitz in his last start. These guys are not lighting up the radar gun in terms of getting swings and misses. Kohanowitz is throwing like 96-mile-an-hour sinkers, so that was pretty cool to see. But what I mean to say is their bread and butter has not been striking out a ton of guys and inducing a bunch of swings and misses. It's getting quick outs. It's getting fly outs. It's getting soft contact. It's getting ground balls and turning double plays. And yes, you can call those dirty outs, but they're outs nonetheless. They speed up the inning. They get you through the inning. And so when I look at this proposal and how it would affect our Halos, look, them pitching a whole inning and 1/3, you really have to consider who has started for the Angels this season. I mean, Carson Fulmer, obviously, you've seen Kenny Rosenberg and Davis Daniel, and you've seen Ronzi Contreras even start. And those guys aren't always going to give you the longest amount of length in terms of pitching innings. However, even if this were the rotation that we expected this year of Anderson and Sandoval and Detmers and Canning and Silseth, Mike, I'd still be suspect about their ability to pitch this 6-inning minimum. And it would concern me moving forward because I just don't think baseball is built for this anymore. I don't think baseball is built for this idea. And like you mentioned in the last segment, all of these people, the pitching coaches and the GMs and everybody talking about how they would have to change their strategy to get through a lineup. To me, it's too many. You're turning too many dials in this situation. And I don't think that this is the same thing as, hey, we got to cancel the shift. The shift is done. There's still, boundaries you can move within, but your shortstop can't play on the second base side. That to me, that's one click on one dial.
Sure.
This to me is too many clicks on too many dials, and you're going to change the entire game. And this isn't me. Maybe I am turning into an old head, but the fact is I just think it's too much, too soon, too quickly, and also it's pointless in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that what this does for the Angels, John, is it repeats the pattern that we have hated as everydayers and as fans. The pattern has been new pitching coach, new management, new pitching coach, new management.
Yeah.
Now, new strategy, new pitch mix, new approach, new this, new that, right? And so we've talked about tunneling, right? We've talked about hitting the strike zone, hitting your spots, those types of things. The Angels haven't figured that out yet. And then all of a sudden you're going to throw in, oh, by the way, now you have to go 6 innings, right? This just feels like you're adding on top of pitchers already so much. To see what happens, I love when a former NFL quarterback tells us what the play is that we're watching on the screen. Mm-hmm. And they're like, it's Z right, out left, slot. The words are crazy, right? Omaha. And so all of that means something. That is why some quarterbacks are great. And that is why some quarterbacks really struggle. The smart ones can figure out the plays and know what each one. Patrick Mahomes is an example of that. Tom Brady is an example of that. But then you also see quarterbacks struggle. I think that what you're going to see is more pitchers struggle with this, particularly Angel pitchers struggling with this, especially if they're young and vibrant and coming up. What this could potentially do for MLB is 2 things. One, they're going to lean on the Justin Verlanders and the Max Scherzers. They're going to lean on those pitchers. It actually might extend their career a bit, right? But I think what it'll also do is, I guarantee you, if they make this decision, they're going to raise the mound again because strikeouts will go down, and that's going to change the game. And then they're going to say, we want some more strikeouts. So they're going to raise the mound again like they did in years past when Bob Gibson was so fantastic and was, awesome on the mound and striking everybody out. And they're like, hey, we have to change that because it's not helping offenses, it's not attractive, right? So I think that those are some of the things that will happen in baseball. For the Angels, I just think, John, this is another pivot that this Angel organization that doesn't really have a direction is going to get overwhelmed by.
Yeah, and, to give the Angels some credit, I would say that every pitching development system would be overwhelmed by this because you've been teaching these young guys coming into your organization how to pitch one way, and then suddenly you have to pivot and make a change. And these kids have been doing it since college, since high school, since Little League, right? And so to suddenly change that and make everybody follow this philosophical shift because, a former lawyer from New York wants to do this on a whim, I just think it's silly. I don't think that this has any chance of going through. And if the Players Association has anything to say about it, I'm sure that they wouldn't be for this either.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On MLB podcast with our friend Sully. He's going to make you a smarter fan when you watch or listen to his show. You can find him on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.
Hey, give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Angels, at Super Halo Bros on both Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening on a podcast platform, come on over to YouTube, get in the comment section. It's the best way to interact with us. We love responding to your comments. We try to get to every single one every day as best we can. And on your way down there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
So what are the chances the Halos get the number 1 overall pick next year? Well, we've got the percentages, and we're going to share them with you tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
And I have a little something regarding that conversation that not even Mike knows about that I'm going to do. So I'll surprise you with that on tomorrow's show. All right, friends, until tomorrow's show, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.
What are the chances of a girl like you and a guy like me? And that's what I was thinking of when I said what are the chances?
1 in a million.